Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela and Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, this is our podcast about sailing the East Coast of the United States. In some episodes, we will focus on passages and destinations. In other episodes, we'll talk about boats, equipment, and techniques. And when we come across an interesting person, we'll try to get them as a guest on the show. Before we dive into this episode, we need to say a special thank you to our supporters. Several listeners are supporting the podcast using Patreon. If you would like to join them, just go to patreon.com/sailingtheeast.
Yeah, this is great, Bela, because this is episode 92, so we're getting close to triple digits already, which time flies. But yeah, thanks to all the listeners, the growth has been really incredible. But, 92 down, right? Our 91 down. Here's one. The next one's ready to go. What do you have teed up for today's episode?
Well, today, Mike, fall is in the air. The evenings are cool. The daylight is getting shorter. And so I thought this would be a good time to maybe sort of do a recap on the sort of what we experienced, what we saw, and sort of the lessons we learned from another sort of season that's almost in the books. Another sailing season that's almost in the books. I was out at the boat this past weekend, so it's Thursday. I was at the boat Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and had a great sail on Monday. The Narragansett Bay runs north-south, and the prevailing wind is usually from the south. And the marina is sort of at the north end of the bay. So if I want to go anyplace, most of the times I'm beating into the wind, or, I'm tacking back and forth doing the zigzag pattern to get south. And on this particular day, Monday, the wind was from the west. And when the wind is from the west or the east, I can basically go straight up and down the bay and just kind of go out, set the sail, and go. And it was great. It was a sunny day. There was about 10 to 12 knots of wind, which our boat really likes 10 to 12 knots of wind. It's just, it sails really pleasant. It's well balanced. I'm doing 5.5 to 6 knots. And, it was such a pleasure. It was really great. I really, and I was doing it solo. So I was solo sailing. So that was, really, it almost felt, spiritual when I was out there. It was one of those great experiences. So that was really cool. The other thing I did this past, trip was I started the winterization process. Every year up here, everything freezes. So I need various different systems on the boat. And I tackled winterizing the generator and the air conditioning. So both of those use seawater to help cool those systems. So I need to basically get the seawater out of there and put in antifreeze in its place. So I got those two done, which will then make the rest of the winterization of the boat a little bit easier next time. It was a rainy day on Tuesday, so it was perfect for me to tackle those two projects on the boat. Yeah, so that's what I did this past trip. And so let's just kind of recap the whole summer. So Paradox typically goes back into the water the first week in May. So the marina I'm at is amazing because every year I sign a contract to keep my boat there. And in that contract, they ask me, when would you like to put the boat in the water in the spring? And they asked for me to give them like a week, the week of. And in the fall, they always ask, when would you like to take the boat out? And the marina has about 350 boats in it. Now, probably 100 of those go on trailers and people take them home. But the other 250 get taken out of the water and put up on land. And then there's a bunch of boats that come from other places because there's many marinas on the bay, on Narragansett Bay, that do not have any storage for boats in the winter. So those boats have to be taken out some other place. So I always view this as sort of like a game of Tetris at the marina, because people want to get the boat out at a certain time and then they want to put it back in. But they're putting these boats in these big parking lots that are all boxed in, right? Because they're trying to cram as many boats into a square foot as possible. So they sort of have to think this all through, because you don't want to put a boat way in the back that you want to then put in the water early because you can't get to it. And then the customer's not going to be happy. And I always ask for the first week of May to put the boat in the water, and the first week of November, take the boat out of the water. And I've been there 4 years now, and they have accommodated me every time. And somehow the geniuses there figure out how to do this. And it's just amazing to me, because I'll look at where the boat is. Like this past winter, it was tucked away back in a corner. And I'm going, oh my gosh, it's going to be middle of June before the boat gets in the water. But sure enough, they got it put in the first week of May. So they're really, really good at that. And that's nice to see. So one of the projects I had for the boat this year was the boat has a Dodger on it, which is sort of right in front of the cockpit. It's like a windshield for the cockpit. So it kind of protects you from the wind and the elements. It's got a little bit of a roof on it, and it has windows in it. And these windows are made from a plastic material that's flexible, because this Dodger, as it's called, is made out of canvas, and then the canvas has holes in it, and they put this flexible plastic thin, it looks like saran wrap, but it's really, really thick version of saran wrap. And that stuff ages and it gets kind of cloudy. It's probably like having cataracts. and the stuff on the boat was getting pretty old. So it was hard to see out of it, particularly when it would be wet. So I said, okay, we're going to tackle that. Tackle means hire somebody to do that, because that's sort of a specialized skill to sew that stuff in there. And, it got me thinking, Mike, that all of these Dodgers, that every boat, every sailboat, most power boats have a Dodger and a bimini. A bimini is sort of a little roof over the top of where you sit on the boat to protect you from the sun. And all of these things are made custom. There's these canvas shops. There's one at the marina, and the guy comes out and he measures your boat, and then he makes this pattern, and then they cut the pattern out and they fit it to your boat. And it's all custom work. And it's highly skilled because they look great, right? I mean, they know what they're doing. And when it's custom work, as you can imagine, it's pretty expensive. It costs a lot of money. And like to do like a full Dodger set on my boat is probably like $5,000 or $6,000. And I got to thinking, I mean, of my boat, of that model, I think they made close to 200 of them. So, why don't they just some company come out with, okay, here's the standard, right? or here's one that we made, and it's, since we got the patterns already made and all the boats are the same, here's, it's $1,000 cheaper or something. I mean, it just seems like, and some boats, they make several hundred of them, in a production run. So it always struck me as, why is this such a custom business? And I understand that, people want the window here, not over there. They want it a little taller. They want it a little shorter. But I don't know if they actually want it that way, or that's just the way the person designed it, because each one is custom designed. Interesting.
Well, sounds like a good digital platform business, and sounds like, since one of us is retired and has some time on their hands, that it might be interesting to talk to this guy at the marina and see if that's something he's interested in trying, and test it out. Do the imposter judo thing, right? Where you put up a website and say, hey, here's these Dodger covers and these biminis for these 5 boats, ones that he's made in the last year. And if you want to order one, here's the price, and click here. And then if you're not sure he has them or they're ready, say, okay, when you click it, you say, okay, it's going to be 3 to 6 weeks, right? Or something like this for now, and see what happens. But it might be interesting just to create a little e-commerce site and test that hypothesis out. Yeah. Where to post that stuff, right? So yeah, it'd be interesting. I will say, all of these people, all these canvas shops are busy. I mean, it took like 3 months for me to get this done, from the time I spoke to him to the time he delivered it. And I was at the marina, the same place he's at. So it's a super easy job for him. He doesn't have to go someplace. Right? There's no extra travel time. Right. There's no extra travel time. It was basically take the old one off, cut the old windows out, sew new windows in.
That's all they did, right? It wasn't
And
like they
then
had to
can
make
you
a whole new
install
one.
it yourself, or does he have to go to install it?
He did that for me.
But you
Right?
could do it. So
I
if,
could
if
have.
you were in
Right.
California and you had your model boat and he UPS'd it to you, could you install it yourself?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think you should talk to him and test it out. How, and find out of that lag time, how much of that is the actual production time versus all the other things that are going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
Interesting.
that was sort of the one scheduled thing that I had done. The other comment I wanted to make was that last year, at the beginning of last year, we had the bottom paint done on the boat. And when we took the boat out this past fall, a year ago almost, the bottom paint still looked good. So we decided not to put another coat on it. And so this will be the second season on the bottom paint. So we'll see what it looks like when it comes. I mean, sitting at the marina, it doesn't look like it has a lot of growth on it or anything. It looks like it's done quite well. And we used the brand we used was called Seahawk. And they have various different lines, and the line we used was Color Coat, and it seemed to work pretty good. So we'll see what it looks like when we pull it out of the water. And my guess is we'll probably have to put another coat of bottom paint on it for next year, because getting 2 seasons out of a bottom paint is pretty good, I think.
And what's the ballpark? How much does that cost roughly?
Well, this should be much cheaper because last time we took off all the old paint all the way down to the gel coat, and we put on some epoxy barrier coat. So the paint is pretty expensive. The paint runs $150 a gallon. So it'll probably take 2.5, 3 gallons for me to do the bottom of the boat. Okay. One coat.
And then you put it on with a roller, or do you spray?
Yeah, you roll it on.
It?
No, you roll it on. Okay. Yeah, so you got to sand. You got to rough up the surface of the old one. Mm-hmm. So sand it, and then you roll the new stuff on. And so it goes on pretty easy, because the bottom isn't a flat surface, but there's not a lot of sharp corners or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
you do that yourself?
That's what I'm thinking. Yep, I'm thinking of doing it myself. It's kind of nasty to sand that stuff because. Remember, it's put on the bottom so that marine life doesn't grow on it. So it's sort of toxic type stuff.
Yeah. So respirator, please.
Yeah, you got to wear a respirator, and you got to put on one of those Tyvek suits and stuff. So it's not a pleasant.
I'm sure you'd look good in that Tyvek suit. But, yeah.
Yes, I'm sure. I would. Yeah, exactly. So that's probably a project for next season before the boat goes into water next season. So then, when I put the boat in the water, I have 2 bathrooms, 2 heads in the boat. And on the one near the back of the boat, I noticed there was like a little puddle of this pink fluid, which is the antifreeze that I used to winterize the system on the floor. And I go, how did that leak on the floor? It's a kind of weird place, but I didn't think much of it. And so, de-winterized the boat, got it ready, commissioned the boat as they call it, and was using the bathroom, and I noticed another little puddle of water next to the toilet. And I go,
That's not good.
What's going on there? I'm looking at the ceiling, like, did I leave the hatch open and the water dripped in, or did I splash water on the floor? So I finally figured out, I got a leak in the toilet, and so that's not good. And the good news was the toilet wasn't plugged. The real disaster on a toilet is particularly on a boat, is if the toilet gets plugged, because that's not pleasant. The toilet was not plugged at all, but it was leaking. And there's a couple places that the toilet can leak. There's sort of a gasket, just like on your house toilet, where it sort of attaches to the ground. There's a gasket there. And these toilets, marine toilets, come sort of in 2 flavors. There's mechanical ones, where there's a hand pump where you sort of you do your business, and then there's like a little hand pump you pump up and down, and that's what pumps the stuff out into the holding tank. And then the other popular kind these days are electric ones. So mine's an electric one. So there's an electric motor, and I basically just push a button, and that a motor turns on, and it grinds it up. It's got a blender in it, kind of grinds everything up and pumps it out into the tank. Works great. So I much prefer those over the mechanical pump ones.
Sure.
And so I go, okay, I got to figure out what's going on here. So I flushed a lot of clean water through the toilet, put on my rubber gloves, and I figured out that there was a leaky seal on the pump motor, on the blender / pump. And so I was able to get a rebuild kit, and I got a for it, put the seal in, put it all back together, and it has worked great all year. But that was sort of first dive into the marine toilet, and like I said,
literally,
I was very glad it was not a clog. I was happy it was just a leaky seal on a pump.
So like time and money, how much did the rebuild kit costs, and how many hours did it take you to troubleshoot and repair?
Yeah, so I think the rebuild kit was like $45 or something.
Okay, so not much.
Yeah, it gave me all the gaskets and all the seals
and
I
now,
needed.
Right, now you got stuff for next time, right?
Right, now I got, right. So that was all good. It took me a while to figure it out, right? It's the first time I ever dove into it. All right, I did watch a couple of YouTube videos to sort of try to figure out what's going on. And then it took me a while to, okay, this is the seal that's leaking. So I probably spent a good hour or two kind of taking things apart and diagnosing it, and then another hour putting stuff back together. The elapsed time was 3 or 4 days because I had to order the kit online. I couldn't find one locally. So Amazon took care of that. If I had to do it again, I could probably do the whole thing in 2 hours, if not faster.
Sure,
because
once
you do it once, right,
you recognize it, you know how to fix it.
Right. I know how to take things apart. I know where the seals are and all that kind of stuff. So
that's first learning curve.
Absolutely, yeah, and it always takes me a long time the first time.
Right, it's true with everything and everybody in life, right? I think,
Yeah.
So unless you get really lucky, right? But
yeah.
Interesting. And so for everything like this, I mean, there's obviously some things where you're going to call, take it to the marina or call somebody or something, right? Like the windows on the Dodge or something like that. But something like this, like how long would you go before you called, somebody to come in and look at it if you couldn't figure it out yourself? A week, 2 weeks?
I'm pretty persistent on this stuff, and I probably have an overabundance of self-confidence that I can fix these things, which has gotten me into trouble sometimes. But I enjoy tackling this stuff.
Right, and you're retired, and right, and
I'm
it's
retired.
not going to sink the
time.
boat, and it's not like it's spewing sewage all over the inside of your boat or anything like that.
Right. So, for example, here's a good thing. There was one of for me to reef the mainsail. I'm going to talk about this later, but when I reef the mainsail, there's a line there that I use to reef it, and it's a continuous loop line. So it's a line that's been spliced together, so it's a loop, cool. and so you pull the line one way and it rolls this thing up, and you pull it the other way and it unrolls it. It's a very clever design. However, if that line breaks, it takes this special splice to splice this 1/2-inch rope together so it looks like a continuous rope. And that broke on me this year. And I went to the marina and I said, hey, you guys, because I watched a couple of YouTube videos and I was I think I could do this. But when it broke, I went to the marina. I said, hey, is there someone here? And they said, oh, yeah. Frank's the guy. He's our line splicer. Because there's all sorts of lines that get spliced on boats. I mean, you don't think about this, but they take a rope and they splice a loop into the end of it, and all that stuff is handwork. There's all sorts of things like that on various different lines. So he said, yeah, Frank does that. So I said, okay, send Frank down. I got a job for him. And Frank came down and he spliced this. It took him probably about 25 minutes to splice, take the old rope off, thread it through all the things it threads through, and then splice it in place there. Because you can't splice it in the shop. You have to actually splice it on the boat.
Attach it. It's got to be attached.
Yeah,
right?
It's
Otherwise,
got to
it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And he's got some sort of little device that.
Yes. Yeah. He had these little long skinny fiddles, and he knows how to cut it, and he threads it through, and it was pretty clever, just like watching a YouTube video. And so, but there's an example of something that I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Right. You could have done it, but by the time you bought the little device and spent the time to learn it, and that it would have been, it's way cheaper and faster to have this guy walk down to your boat.
Do it.
Yes. And it was like the same day. Was it like the same day that you went in, or the next day? Was it
next
fast?
day? He came down the next day. So yeah, I would have had to buy like $75 in tools, and this was the original rope. So the original one lasted 13 years.
So hopefully this will last just as long.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And so what's the total cost of something like that?
So I think his labor was like $75 because it was like a half hour. And I think they bill out at $150 at the marina. And it was about another $60 for the rope itself.
Yeah. So that was cheaper than you figuring it all out on your own.
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
So anyway.
Now, but if you were like, okay, but what would happen if you were crossing the ocean, right? Like some of our guests, right? Would you have one of those splicing kits and do it yourself on the fly, or would you just kind of fix it on the, kind of do a temporary fix and go, or just deal with it?
So that's a good question. I think before this happened, I would have just gone with it. I think now I would have a splicing kit and some extra line.
If you're going on a long trip. Yeah. Makes sense.
Because you can't roll up. I mean, it actually broke on Andy and I when we were out sailing. And we figured out, and the sail was out when the line broke.
And it's flapping, right? If it's
right. And so we got to figure out some way to bring it in. So we did figure out a way, because we basically had a long piece of line that we threaded through in one direction. And pulled. And then we pulled it until we ran out of line, and then we threaded it through again. Right. So we did it like 3 times, because the whole idea of the continuous line is you just keep going as much as you don't need
nearly as much line.
Right. So it was laborious, but we were able to roll up the sail, and we figured that out. So,
but this was nice conditions. There were 2 of you, right? And something a little worse, it might have been a little hairier, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's always a good question. How much stuff do you take with you on a long trip? How self-sufficient you want to be. And, these folks who go to the South Pacific, or, they go to Greenland, I mean, you have to be 100% self-sufficient, because you can't call Frank to come down and splice this for you. Right. And so you have to figure it does put a whole nother level of sort of self-reliance in the picture, right? It's sort of self-reliance and this notion of managing your resources, managing your food, managing your water, managing your power, and, being off grid, and sort of being very conscious of that. I think I shared with you the story once. I was talking to somebody and who oftentimes have guests on their boat. They charter their boat, but they charter it so they're the captain and the cook, and they bring guests on. So the guests, if they want to sail, they can, but if they just want to lounge around, they can lounge around. And oftentimes people or their friends will offer to do the dishes. And they always say, no, we'll do the dishes. Because people on land waste water like crazy. And when you're on a boat, they learn the lesson the hard way. People would be doing dishes and they just leave the water running. Right. Right. No, you can't do that. We only have 120 gallons for the week.
Right. You can use 1 to clean up, right? Not 10.
Right. So you put a little bit of water in, and then you wash all the,
Right.
So we always do the dishes, because they've just gotten in this mode of conservation. And so it really makes you aware of that stuff. Even for us, I mean, and we tend to be pretty conservative on that kind of stuff, but it really was like, oh, wow, you got to manage your electricity, turn the lights off, don't leave them on all the time, and just stuff like that. It's really good for that. Yeah.
Cool. This is cool. So, okay, so you had a few things to fix, and none of them turned out to be major this year, which, knock on wood, was good. What else did you do this season
Yeah.
that we can talk through?
Oh, so another repair thing was I noticed one day when we're out motoring around, the instrument panel for the engine has an oil pressure gauge on it, has a water temperature gauge and oil pressure gauge on it. And the oil pressure gauge normally hangs around at, I don't know, 40 or 60. And all of a sudden I looked at it and it was like pegged way over to the right.
Uh-oh.
Like, whoa, that's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And, the engine sounded okay. And, I mean, that's better than going to zero.
Right.
Right.
But
This
still
went
something's
the
wrong.
other direction.
Yeah.
Still something's going on. But then it would go back to normal and then it would peg itself. So it was bouncing around. So I figured it must be electrical. Some connection's a little dirty or corroded. So when I got back next day or something, I found where the oil pressure sending unit was on the engine, and I kind of took the connector off and I cleaned it and I put it back. And next time I used it, hey, it's working good. But that lasted like for an hour or two, and then it was doing the same thing again. And so eventually I diagnosed that the oil pressure sending unit was bad. So, and the gauge and the sending unit were made by the same manufacturer, a company called VDO. So that was the brand. So I found a sending unit. So the engine is made by Yanmar, which is a Japanese company. And it turns out that this sending unit has a special thread on it. It's called a BSET, which is British Standard Pipe Thread. And
I've never heard of this.
Either have I. And the rest of the world uses NPT, which is National Pipe Thread. and so I priced out. I priced out the Yanmar sending unit, $150, because it's got this special thread on it. And, it took a little bit of research on the internet and, reading about other people's horror stories about these sending units for me to figure this out. And so I said, but I found a another same brand, VDO brand, oil pressure sending unit that had the national pipe thread, which is what most of the world uses, for $17. So I said 150 versus 17. This is crazy. Same exact unit, except the threads are different. And then, again, because of doing some research on various different sailing forums, this is where these sailing forums are really good. Somebody said, hey, and I was reading about this person with the same problem. This person found an adapter. And a national pipe thread at one end and a British Standard pipe thread on the other end. So I found one of those adapters online, $9. So I bought the $17 sending unit that had the, national pipe thread fitting on it and this adapter. And so I solved the whole problem for, $26 as opposed to 150, and put the new sensor in there. Works great. Works absolutely great. Yeah. And why there's these two pipe thread standards is beyond me. Right. So I did a little research. So listen to this. This is the difference between the two of them, Mike. So national pipe threads differ from the British standard pipe threads in tooth angle. So the tooth angle is, the tooth angle, 60 degrees versus 55 degrees.
So the number of threads are the same. It's just the angle of the threads are different.
No. Threads. The national pipe thread has 11.5 threads per inch, and the British standard pipe thread has 11 threads per inch. Oh,
dear Lord. So nothing works. Right.
So it's close. So the danger here is it feels like it might want to go in. Right. And on some forums I read, people just said, yeah, I just screwed it in there and it works fine.
But that's not what you want to be doing on something like this. Right.
Because you get one shot at it. Right.
Yeah.
But why do you have to have those two standards, which are so freaking close? It just drove me nuts. It's like, why? But anyway,
I could say something about the British, but we'd get a lot of listener feedback, so I'm not even going to go there.
Right. So those were kind of the repairs pieces. Also had a couple of great trips this year. So let's talk a little bit about trips. I did a 4-day trip with a ski patrol buddy of mine, Larry, and we did this in the 3rd week in May, which is pretty early in the season still. Yeah. But the great part about that is we got into a marina in Newport. So there's this marina in Newport. There's a bunch of marinas in Newport Harbor, but one of them is called Newport Shipyard. And Newport Shipyard is part of the Safe Harbor Marina family that my marina is, which means if they have a slip, I can stay there for free. So used their reservation system, was able to get a slip there for 4 days at Newport Shipyard. Now, the unique thing about Newport Shipyard is this is one of the only super yacht capable shipyards kind of in this part of, Long Island Sound, Boston area. There was a 140-foot sailboat there. It was unbelievable. Yeah. And there were other huge mega yachts there. Yeah. I mean, these were just unbelievable. It's about a 5-minute walk to Newport. I mean, our boat was probably the smallest boat in the marina.
Wow.
My boat's not that small. It's 45 feet, but it was probably the smallest boat in the marina. So it was like a 5-minute walk to downtown Newport, which was really nice. So the other interesting thing was this marina has a nice little restaurant where they serve breakfast and lunch with a little veranda that you can sit out on. It's got a gym, right, where you can work out. Right, it's got a gym, and then it's got bathrooms and showers. And the bathrooms and showers were like in this trailer, and it was just scratching my head. Like, this is kind of weird. Going on? Yeah, what's going on? And then Larry and I were talking about this at dinner, and he said, "You know what? All of those boats in the marina probably have really nice showers and bathrooms, with marble and gold faucets and stuff. They're not going to put all their clothes into a little bag and walk up to use the bathroom and shower on land.
That's just the staff,
That's exactly. Right. That's just for schmoes like me." So we figured that out why that was true. So that was kind of neat. So it was really neat to kind of stay at this fancy high-end boatyard, a working yard. There was a lot of boats up on land, a lot of big mega yachts up on land they were working on. And it was just, you could see it was really geared towards kind of super yachts coming in and having maintenance work done on them. But from there, it's really a short sail out to what's called Block Island Sound, which is where the mouth of the Chesapeake the mouth of the Narragansett Bay dumps out into the ocean. And, so it's fully exposed from the south. I mean, if I sailed south out of Narragansett Bay, I think Antarctica's the next chunk of land I hit.
Wow.
Right. So you get big swells out there, you get these big rolling waves. And so we went out there 3 days and we think, okay, we're going to try to sail. We want to sail the Block Island and back because we'd leave in the morning. And in the morning we had a good breeze. So, and we're going straight towards Block Island, and we'd get about halfway there and then the wind died. And we tried that 3 times, and all 3 times it was the same pattern. Hey, we're going to make it. And then the wind would die. Wow. Yeah. Then we end up motoring back. So anyway, that was one nice trip I had.
But you never made it to Block Island.
Never made it to Block Island.
So is that on your bucket list for next year? Are you going to try again, or okay?
Not this season, but I'd like to make it to Block Island. Yeah, we have. I mean, we could have motored there, right? But
that's not the point, right?
That's not the point. Yeah. And so then the next trip out to the boat was a working trip, not on the boat. But my son, as you know, one of my sons lives out there very close to the marina, and he bought this old house. Him and his wife bought this old house, and they've been rehabbing it. And kind of their last big project is they have some dormers on the second floor, and they were replacing the windows on those dormers. So I helped him get those 2 windows. I was there, Kate's father was there, and the 4 of us kind of were able to get the old windows out and the new windows in. And, we're hanging off of ropes on the roof because you're on the roof, and, we had climbing harnesses on. So it was a labor intensive job, but we got that done. So that was kind of fun. Yeah.
Cool. No, it's nice to help the kids with that. And that is a tough project, getting up there on those dormers. I've seen people, I've done a little bit of roof work and I've done a little bit of window work, but never hanging like that up there. I can imagine that's a little bit touch and go, and trying to get everything square and level right. But mission accomplished and no injuries.
Yeah. No injuries. Nope. Nobody fell off the roof. And it's one of those things where you just need a lot of people, right? Because you need some people on the ground. You need some people inside the house. You need some people outside the house. So anyway, and then so after that, I did a trip with my son, a 4-day trip with my older son, not Andy, but my older son Jason. So this time, this was the second week in June, and I tried to get into Newport Shipyard again. Couldn't get in there. They said, "Sorry, we're full." And
high season,
so
right? Pretty much.
Yeah. The season starts. So we went to Jamestown Boatyard. Jamestown Boatyard is directly across from Newport Harbor on Jamestown Island. And there they don't have any slips. All they have are moorings. So
which is fine, right?
Yeah, which is fine. So that was great. So we got on a mooring. It was about a 30-minute walk down into Jamestown, which is a nice little town. It's got some restaurants, little shops of various different types. So we took up a mooring. We walked downtown to Jamestown, and so that was kind of nice. We had a nice dinner at a restaurant down there one night. The other couple nights we cooked on the boat. And here again, we wanted to go to Block Island. That was sort of what we were trying to do.
The theme.
Yeah, here we go again. And so I think the first morning we wake up and it's foggy. And it's like really foggy. So we go, okay. We took our time. We had a nice breakfast. And it was still, it wasn't foggy right where we were, but soon as you looked south out in towards the ocean or towards Block Island Sound, you could see it was foggy. So what we decided, so what we decided to do was let's go motor around Newport Harbor, because Newport Harbor is a big harbor.
Beautiful.
Probably got 1,000 boats in it. And I didn't know this, but there's fundamentally a perimeter, I call it a perimeter road, a perimeter path that goes around the harbor. So this perimeter goes between land and all the restaurants and shops and where all the boats are moored. So it's sort of, you can basically go all around the harbor because the moorings are basically set up in a grid pattern. And so we went over there and we motored around this perimeter road. So we basically were able to see the whole harbor and see all these cool looking boats. It's just got this great variety of old boats and brand new boats and mega yachts and stuff. And by the time we sort of took our time and motored around that, the fog started to lift. So we said, great, let's start going out into Block Island Sound. So we're starting this a little bit of a breeze, not very much, but we put our sails up and we're sort of sailing out. And there's a sailboat in front of us, probably maybe 200 yards in front of us. And it was sort of a hazy day. So sometimes it's hard to see the horizon, like where the water stops and the clouds start, because everything is sort of a little bit foggy and hazy. And we noticed that the sailboat in front of us just kind of disappeared. Like, where'd they go? I mean, we saw them there a second ago, and now they're gone. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then we keep going in that direction. And then we notice sailboat pops up again, but now it's heading towards us. Well, it was a fog bank.
Okay.
But I couldn't distinguish the fog bank.
Yeah, right? It's opaque in the same color as the sky and the water.
Oh, everything was the same color. And I said, holy crap. And it was like this boat just disappeared and then reappeared. And we said, okay, we're not going
Creepy.
anywhere. So we turned
Ghost
around.
ships. Yeah.
Yes, ghost ships, exactly. Exactly. So that was kind of neat. And then the other 2 days we had some good sails out out there. And it was Jason's kind of first experience out in the ocean with swells and rollers and stuff like that. And again,
interesting.
we didn't quite make it to Block Island. So we ended up coming back to Jamestown both times. So that was pretty good. Yeah.
Cool. That's really neat. Neat to now both kids have been out on the ocean with you, and right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, okay,
yeah.
What was the next trip after that?
Oh, so next trip was Andy and Kate. So this worked out really great because Elaine got to watch June, the baby. So Elaine stayed at their house and watched June when Andy and Kate came out to go sailing with me it was 3 days. It was just 2 nights. And so Andy and I were sailing out down towards the bay. Again, the same plan. This time we were going to stay in a place called Dutch Harbor, which is on Jamestown Island, but it's on the western side of that island. Okay. And whereas Jamestown, where we stayed at, Jamestown Harbor was on the east side. Dutch Harbor is on the west side. Again, it's only moorings. So that's where we were going to stay for 2 nights. Okay. And so we're starting to leave our marina. We get out into the bay and we start unrolling the sail and it jams. So turns out I was not diligent the last time I rolled the sail up. And so this is the main sail. I think I've talked about this before. Our main sail rolls up into the mast, and it's a confined space. So you have to roll it up snugly, and you have to roll it up properly so there's no wrinkles in it. And I wasn't paying attention last time I rolled it up. So when I went to unroll it, it didn't want to come out. So Andy and I struggled with that for quite a while. And the trick, the proper technique for rolling it up is you have to make sure the boom is at the proper angle, because you can imagine
like up and down.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Right. Boom has to be at the proper angle, because if it's up too high, then when you roll up the sail, the top of the sail wrinkles. Okay. Right? Because you have this triangular piece that's not, and if it's down too low, then the bottom of the sail wrinkles.
So it's got to be perfectly perpendicular.
Right. And what happens is if you have too much wind pressure on the sail, in order to roll it up, you have to sort of release the back end of the sail that's holding the sail tight. You have to release that. And then if there's too much wind pressure on the sail, it automatically lifts the boom up. And that's what happened to me. Okay. So it doesn't really lift the boom up, but the sail can go up because you have slack in it. Rolled up sloppily, and so it was jammed. And Andy and I fussed with that for probably a good hour and a half. And what you have to do is you basically have to just roll it in a little bit, let it out a little bit, roll it in a little bit, and just kind of work it back and forth. And we got it unjammed, but a good lesson learned in sort of that pay attention to when you're rolling it up, because you can get it in trouble. So here again, we got a mooring in Dutch Harbor. The first night was great. It was really nice. The second night, boy, we had a blow come through. We probably had 30 knots of wind. And Dutch Harbor is well protected for winds from the south, winds from the east, and winds from the west. But it's not super well protected from winds from the north. And guess from what direction the winds were blowing?
From the north.
Yeah. From the north. So I don't think any of us slept very well that night. And it reminded me of when I was doing those ocean passages and trying to sleep at night when we're on the ocean. I mean, the boat was rocking up and down as if we were sailing out on the ocean. It was remarkable. But we did venture out into Block Island Sound. And this was the first trip out there for Kate, the first time she'd ever been sort of out in the ocean. Andy went out with me last year out there. And interesting enough, they both got a little seasick.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we had some big swells. We probably had 5-foot swells. So the boat's moving up and down pretty good. Um, and I think both of them went separately. They went down below to do something. And when they were down below, they came up and said, I can't stay down there much longer. And that's what happens to a lot of people when you go down below and you can't, everything's moving, but your brain doesn't.
No horizon.
There's no horizon to look at.
Yeah.
Right. So, but they came up and I mean, they didn't throw up or anything, so they weren't that sick, but they just felt a little off. And then a cool thing happened. I've never seen this in the harbor before, in the bay, in Narragansett Bay. On our way back, just north of the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge, we saw a bunch of bottlenose dolphins.
Wow.
Yeah, and you always see pictures of dolphins like swimming next to the boat. That's not what this was. There must have been a big school of bait fish in there, because there was 100 of these dolphins swimming around, and you could see they were feeding, because they were all around the boat in this big area, and you just see them come up for air and then go back down, and then come up for air, and they were all over the place. So that was really, really cool to see that. That was a great experience.
Neat. And they don't care about you, right? They just
No, they don't care.
Interesting.
I mean,
and would like a boat if the motor was on, would they go move away, or they don't care?
They don't care. I mean, on those passages when we were out in the ocean, sometimes they'll come follow the boat for a half hour. They'll just swim next to the boat.
Oh.
For whatever reasons they do that. Yeah. So, yeah, but the movement of the boat doesn't seem to bother them, whether it's a motorboat or a sailboat. So it was cool.
Neat. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good season, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was. And then, of course, we can't forget Camp Paradox.
Yeah, you took your grandkids out, right?
Yes, which they call Camp Paradox. And so had the girls out. They're 7 and 9 for 1 week. So that was a lot of fun. We basically just did day sails out of the marina. And there's a pool at our marina. So, they spend some time at the pool. We go out and sail. For them, sailing for 2 or 3 hours is enough. But we had a great time. They love coming to the boat. And so that was really great. And then, the other thing is my niece and her fiance came with us for 2 days. They did this last year as well. And they continued their tradition of coming sailing with Uncle Bela and no wind. So last year they came for 2 days.
I remember you told me about this last year.
It was like no wind. One of the days was rainy. And this year is the same thing, like no wind. But however, on one of the days, we went to the Hershoff Museum in Bristol. So Hershoff is a really, really famous early 1900s boat designer. So he designed a bunch of the America's Cup winning boats back in the days when, the boats were made out of wood and they're very traditional looking boats. So there's a museum down there that we went to check out. And I was really impressed. It was much nicer than I expected. I expected, sort of a little tourist trappy type museum. This was really cool. They had a bunch of boats inside the museum, because they made all sorts of boats, not just sailboats. And it was interesting. It was the business was started by 2 brothers who sort of ran the business. One of them was sort of the genius boat designer, and the other one was sort of the operating person, who just ran the business. And at one point in time, they employed like 350 people there in Bristol. I mean, it was a big operation. And they made boats for the Navy. They made, commercial boats. They made all sorts of boats. And they made these sailboats that won a bunch of America's Cup races. Yeah. So they had a bunch of boats on display. They had a really good movie, like a 45-minute movie that sort of told the whole story. That was really helpful.
Good for a rainy day, right?
Yeah, and you could go walk on the boats. Some of the boats you could get into and walk around on. So I was blown away by, and I think it was like, I don't know, $12 or something, like to walk through the museum. And we spent a good several hours. I think we were there for like 3 hours. It It was really, really nice. So that's the Hirschoff Museum in Bristol, Rhode Island. I highly recommend it. It was really cool. Yeah,
I'll put it on my list next time
yeah,
I'm there.
yeah.
Cool. Well, that sounds neat. So, okay, and that's your season, right?
Yeah, pretty much so. Yep. I mean, here it is. It's September 21st when we record this. I probably got maybe another trip to the boat for some sailing coming up, I think, at the end of the month. And then after that, it's another trip out to get it ready to pull out of the water. And that'll be it.
All right. Well, I think we can rate this season a success on all counts, right? Do you have any goals or ideas for next season? I mean, has any of our guests motivated you to push your limits a little bit or just more of the same?
Well, I'd like to get to Block Island.
Yeah, for sure. Quest for Block Island.
Yeah, I like to get that's the closest sort of island to us. Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket are a little further away, so I'd like to try to get there, but we'll see. As we've learned in sailing, the wind has to be in the right direction and the right intensity, and if we get there, great. If we don't, that's okay too.
Yeah, great. Well, what do you think? Time to wrap this one up?
Yeah, I think so. So hopefully it was a nice summary of what we did this summer and give our listeners a nice view into what sort of a summer of sailing is like up here on Narragansett Bay.
Nice. Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in once again, and we hope that you found this interesting and enjoyable. And if you have questions about anything that we've discussed, please feel free to get in touch with us. As always, our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, please hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting app. That really helps us and helps other listeners find us. So if you know of someone that would be a good guest on the show, let us know. I'd love to invite them on. So hope to see you out there. So end of the season is getting close. It's starting to get chilly here. I think this morning it was 39 degrees here at the house in upstate New York. So see you soon, Mike.
All right, Bela, that's great. And I think, right, if I'm not mistaken, our next episode is a follow-up from our friend Simon and Sawyer, right, crossing the Atlantic. Is that, am I off on that?
Nope, you're right. So I recorded that the other day. And I think when you and I get together next time, we'll do the intro and outro to that one. So that's sort of the last leg of their trip from Horta to Spain, to France, and then to the UK. So that was a good interview I had with them. They had some interesting times, and that should be the episodes that follow this one.
I can't wait. And so listeners, you'll need to tune in after this one, and we'll finish up this long story that we followed Simon and Sawyer in their incredible journey. So from over here in Münster, Germany, Bela, I'll see you next time.
Sounds good, Mike. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.